Hi guys, my name is Bobby and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm doing my November wrap-up. Now in November I didn't read as much as I thought I was going to read. I only read 5 books. I had planned to read a whole bunch more than that and I just kind of failed. I worked a lot of graveyard shifts this month, and with the holiday and all that, I just kind of had to fail. 5 books is better than no books at all, or only 1 book or whatever. But yeah, I only read 5 and I feel kind of I hope December's a little better. I've already beat my Goodreads goal, so I guess I really shouldn't be that upset about it or that grouchy, but still, you know, it was only 5. But anyways, let's get into it. I'm excited to talk about a couple of these, and yeah, let's get started. So the first book that I finished in the month of November was one that was actually on my November TBR to finish, and that was Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I was halfway through it in October, and then I put it down to do the 2 readathons that I did, and I finally finished it, and oh my god, this book is amazing. Like, I cannot wait to continue in this series. So Red Sister is all about Nona, who's right here on the cover, and Nona is 9 years old at the start of the series, or the start of the book, and Nona, like, right at the very beginning, like in the first chapter, she is at a prison, and her friend are about to be hanged, and they don't say why they're going to be hanged, but they're going to be hanged. They're going to be killed. And a nun comes in after her friend is hanged and saves Nona and says, I'm taking her. She's going to be a part of the church and all that. So she takes Nona, she goes up to the church, and she becomes a part of the school. And the school is for people to become assassins, pretty much. So in this world, the world building was very, very good. Like, I loved the world building. It was very kind of slow build. Like, in this world, like, if you imagine Earth and all around the equator, there was just like this strip, just a little bit. That's all their world is amounted to. Like, their sun is dying. So everything is frozen in ice except for this strip that goes around the equator, if you were to compare it to Earth. So there's only a small strip that goes around where people are able to live, and that's just kind of how it goes. So throughout this world, you have all these warring different factions and stuff like that, and you know, they're all trying to compete for this very small piece of land. And if you're a part of the church, which is the Church of the Ancestor, then you're kind of like untouchable. So them taking Nona away means that the crime that she was going to be hanged for kind of becomes null and void, because the church has taken her under their wing to become an assassin nun. So she doesn't, you know, like, it's kind of like the crime has been dismissed or whatever. And so we're following Nona, and a lot of people that I've seen in different reviews said that they thought Nona to be kind of an unreliable narrator, and to a degree she is, but because of her backstory, which you get a lot of it in this book, you realize why she's kind of unreliable and why she kind of lies sometimes to get further. It's because she has no trust in anybody. Like, she has had a really kind of shitty life. And as she explains how she got to where she was, that leads up to the point to where she was going to be hanged, you understand why she is the way she is. But while she's at this school, she's learning how to fight and be an assassin, and she's learning about how to connect with the ancestor by following the path, which is kind of like, I would describe it as like going into almost a hypnosis and like drawing from a magic or a power. And the way they describe it is very interesting. Like, I like the way the magic system is set up. The magic system is, not everybody can use it. It's very, like, you have to be certain blooded. Like, there's these 4 old tribes, like, I hope I'm making sense, but there's like these 4 tribes that have kind of been eradicated, and so the different kingdoms in the world are trying to find people of mixed blood or full blood of these main tribes that started their world, because they tend to have more magical abilities and more power in general. So most of the people who get accepted into the Church of the Ancestor are people of half-blood or quarter-blood, where they show a little bit of sign of being able to do some of these magical abilities. And as we go along with Nona, we realize she does have one of them that's called Hunska, and that means she's really fast and skilled at fighting. And so she's, of course, very set on being a gray sister, and a gray sister is somebody who is an assassin who fights. Because there's a holy sister who is somebody who, it doesn't really meet all the qualifications, but they did kind of okay. So they just support the church, and they clean, and they do this or that, and they just help support the church. And then you have a red sister, a gray sister, and a holy witch, I believe is all of them. I can't remember, and they're all different like levels. Like a holy sister is like the top tier of all. There's certain sisters who can walk the path where others cannot, and like all that. It's a high fantasy, but this is like, I usually don't do well with high fantasy, but this was a high fantasy that I could follow and I understood and I wasn't bored. And I know a lot of people tend to got bored a little bit in the middle of this because it was all, they go to class and they learn this and they do that. And I understand that can be kind of boring, but for me, it was more about the relationships between the characters, and that made it was part of the story. Like, you needed that enrichment of the characters' relationships in order to progress the story and the twist that happens towards the end. And this ends on quite a little bit of a cliffhanger. I have the second book, so I can't wait to read it. And the third book in the trilogy comes out in January, so it's like the perfect time, like, to read this, because then I can read the second one and the third one will come out in January. I already have it on pre-order because, you know, why not? The second book I read in the month of November was The Cellar by Richard Lehman, which is the first book in my Read Along with Richard Lehman series that I'm going to be doing here on my channel, where I read all of Richard Lehman's book in publication order, excluding the ones that I can't get a hold of because they're either out of print or they're YA or they're not in the horror genre that he usually wrote in. The Cellar was 2 stars, and the only reason I rated it 2 stars is because I like Richard Lehman, and I know a lot of his books as he went further on in his career were a lot better. I will link the review down below if you have not watched it. It is a rant review. It's rather long, so I'm not going to go much into it here. But it was 2 stars. It can only get better from here. The third book I read in the month of November was Foe by Ian Reid. I did have this in physical copy. It was a library book. I had to return it because somebody had a hold on it because it is a fairly new book. I did not read, I Think We Are Ending Things. I'm Thinking About Ending Things by Ian Reid. That was his first book. This is his second book, and this one seemed more intriguing to me. Even though I have his first book on Kindle, I still haven't read it. But I read this one. It was rather short, and it was kind of weird. I believe I rated it, let me look, on Goodreads. I rated it 3 stars, which is what I thought I did. I rated this book 3 stars. It was really odd. It was kind of hard to follow. Like, I kind of figured out the twist, like, towards the end. Like, but the way it ended, like, was kind of open-ended. Didn't make that much sense, but it was enough to where, like, I kind of think I know where it was going. But anyways, this book is about Henrietta and Junior, and this takes place in the future. It doesn't really give a year, but you can tell it's kind of like a not too distant future, but not anytime soon. And they live on this farm in the middle of nowhere, and everything is, like, they wanted to be away from the city, and it seems like the city is kind of like hustle and bustle, and there's not many people who live out kind of in the country anymore. And these two, they live alone, they don't really have any friends, they don't do anything. He works at, like, not a refinery, he works at, like, this production plant, like a grain production plant, and Henrietta works somewhere else. I don't remember where she works, they don't really say. But she works somewhere different, and he works at, like, this plant or whatever, and so they just make their living. It's just them. They have no kids. They live out in the middle of nowhere. He has a couple of chickens or whatever that's kind of back on the farm that he takes care of, which I guess is illegal in this time. But, you know, they're just kind of going about their daily lives, and one day this guy shows up. Hi, Lucas. You want to say hi? Come here. Come here. Say hi. Look at the camera. Can you look at the camera. Can you say hi?
They say hi.
This is my son, Lucas. You say hi.
Say hi.
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 Hi, Internet.
Hi, Internet.
Give Mom a kiss. Okay, go. So this guy, Terrence, shows up, and he tells Junior that you've been chosen for this really select, like, program to where you're going to go up into space, and you're going to help get this, like, they don't really say if it's the moon or Mars or wherever, but you're going to help colonize this thing, and then you're going to come back down, like, what do you think about it? And that's kind of where it goes from there. And they pretty much say that Hen, which is short for Henrietta, and they call her Hen throughout the book, that Hen will have a replacement for him to be there with her so she's not alone during this time. This was a very short book. It was really weird. Like, just, I mean, reading about everybody's day-to-day lives was just kind of weird. Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute because if you can hear, like, some weird noises, I'm really sorry. Like, the owner of our apartments is doing some kind of work in the unit below us because they just moved out. And if you can hear it, I'm really sorry. But this is the only time I can film. So I apologize if you can hear it. Whole story was just kind of like their day-to-day life. And then Terrence kind of moves in with them for a bit. And it's just, things just get kind of weird. And I went into the story just with a synopsis, which is pretty vague. And it was engaging. Like, I was able to, you know, stick with it. And I read it, I think, in 2 days. And it was rather engaging. But the ending was just so weird. And I think I know what they were doing with the ending. But I still was just kind of like, really? Like, that's it? Like, I don't know. It was just kind of weird. That's why I got 3 stars. Like, the premise was really good. But the way it was just written was just kind of meh. You know, just kind of eh. The next book that I read, book 4... you guys, like, I did an audiobook and I actually listened to it all and I finished it. Yay me, like the one who won't listen to audiobooks because I get totally distracted. I actually finished an audiobook. And the book that I read or listened to was I Must Say, My Life as a Humble Comedy Legend by Martin Short. Now, if you don't know who Martin Short is, you're obviously living under a rock. But Martin Short is one of my favorite comedians. I've loved him since I was a small girl. Three Amigos is one of my favorite movies. And, like, if I'm going to be completely honest, I kind of have a creepy, like, older man crush on Steve Martin. I own all of his movies, and Steve Martin is, like, everything to me. Like, he's one of those actors that even though I've never met him, obviously, when he dies, I'll probably lose my shit. Like, because he's just, I've loved everything he's ever been in, pretty much. But he's one of my favorite actors. And Martin Short, this is his autobiography. And I saw it on Overdrive. So I was like, oh, well, I'll check it out from my library and read it as an ebook. But then I saw the audiobook. And the audiobook is narrated by Martin Short himself. And I was like, oh, I have to do the audiobook. Because if he's going to read it himself, why would I not? Like, all the characters he's been in his life. Like, he had characters from SCTV and Jiminy Glick and Frank from the Father of the Bride duology movies. Like, I had to listen to it on audiobook just because he was reading it himself. And it was amazing. I rated it 4 stars, I think. 4 or 5 stars. I can't quite remember. But it was amazing. And like, I would not read the actual physical book. If you want to read this and you love Martin Short, please get the audiobook because him narrating it himself made it everything. Like, he has little interludes in the middle of some of the chapters where he is a character, one of his characters, and it is so funny. I laughed out loud multiple times. There were certain things I didn't know about him that now I know. Like, he's Canadian, which I don't know how I didn't know that. He was an orphan by the time he was 20 years old. Both of his parents had passed away. There's just certain things, like, about his life that I didn't know. He was married to his wife for multiple years. Like, he dated Gilda Radner before Gene Wilder. Who knew? But it was really funny, like, hearing about his friendships with other actors. Like, one of his best friends is Tom Hanks. Another kind of cool factoid. But it was really engaging and really fun. And it was really fun to listen to him tell his story. He told it very eloquently, especially talking about, like, his parents' death. And, you know, another death in his family and how he got to where he was and about his childhood. Like, he was very eloquent when he needed to be and calm when he needed to be, and he was crazy and silly when it was warranted, and it was just so good, especially in audiobook form. If you love Martin Short, I highly recommend listening to this in an audiobook. It was absolutely hysterical, but also heartbreaking. Like, the ending of the story broke me. Please go out and read it, but you have to get it in audiobook. And after I finished this, I realized I actually participated in Nonfiction November on accident. Like, I didn't plan on it because I'm not a big nonfiction reader, but an autobiography counts as nonfiction, so I guess I won it Nonfiction November. I read one nonfiction book, but it was amazing. Please go read it if you enjoy Martin Short at all. Last book I finished in November, and I finished it, like, with a week left to go. I think I had like 7 days left to go in November, which is plenty of time to read another book. But this book put me in such a book hangover. I picked up literally 3 other books and none of them engaged me at all. And it was my book of the month pick for the month of November. And when I saw it November 1st, I know I had to have it, and I got it and I read it immediately. It wasn't on my TBR, but I had to read it because it was here and I wanted it. And that book is 9 Perfect Strangers by Leanne Moriarty. I love Leanne Moriarty. I've actually only read Big Little Lies. And she is the author of Big Little Lies, obviously, which was super popular last year on BookTube. They made an HBO miniseries about it, which was also fabulous. But I've got a couple of her other older books that I'd like to read, like My Husband's Secret, What Alice Forgot, I think, and Three Wishes, I think. But this is her newest one. This book was magical. I rated it 5 stars. Like, I absolutely loved it. Her writing is just so amazing. Like, I don't know what it is about her writing, but she is one of those authors that can write about serious, hardcore, like really sensitive topics and make it seem like it's not that big of a deal. And I don't mean that in a negative or insensitive way, but when an author can bring up, like, and this was not in this book, but a topic of like rape and make it seem to where you're not like, ugh, and all gross, and not gloss it over, but just the flow of the story makes it sound like not okay. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm not wording this very well, but where like sensitive topics are made to where you can read them without feeling uncomfortable, and you can read them with understanding like what's going on, but not feeling like really ick on the inside. And she did this fabulously in this book. So this book's synopsis is really vague. It says that 9 strangers go to a health resort and, you know, is it going to help them? Is it not? But they don't really give more than that. So I'll give you a little bit more, because with just that, I was kind of going into this blind. So this is about 9 strangers, and they all come from different walks of life, and they're all coming to this health resort, which now I can't even remember the name of the health resort because Tranquillum House. So they're all going to Tranquillum House for different things, and they're there for 10 days. It's a 10-day cleanse, and they're there for 10 days, and shit hits the fan, and it's interesting. It's not like Big Little Lies to where there's a mystery, because there was no real mystery involved. I guess there's a little bit of mystery around each character, because each of them, as the story develops, you find out why each of them are there and what their reason is for being there. But there isn't like a mystery like in Big Little Lies where, you know, somebody dies in the beginning and you're trying to figure out, well, who died and who killed them and what's the circumstance and blah, blah. This is not like that. And it is a pretty hefty book. This book is 450 pages long. And I read this in 2 sittings. I read the first 100 pages one day, and then on Thanksgiving Day, we didn't do anything on Thanksgiving. We did our Thanksgiving on the Wednesday here in the U.S. Thanksgiving in the U.S., you know, is a big holiday. And we did it on the Wednesday instead of the Thursday. So on Thursday, we all just sat around in our pajamas all day and did nothing. And my husband watched football all day. I read the 360 pages of this book in that day. And I just couldn't put it down. It was that good. So our main character in this book, which I would say is the main character, she's one of the 9, and her name is Frances. And you get more of her point of views. And speaking of point of views, there is multiple POVs in this book. There are 12 POVs, which seems really daunting and kind of over the top. But in this book, you absolutely have to have it. If you don't have the multiple POVs, you don't get the depth and the emotional depth that you need for this story to work. If you just had Frances's point of view, it would not nearly be as effective. I mean, if you only had Frances's point of view, this would probably be a 3-star book. You need the multiple points of view in order for it to work. Like, you have to have it to work. So you have Frances, who she has the most POVs. Like, she is the main character. And she's a middle-aged. She's about 50, 51, somewhere around there. So she's a middle-aged romance novelist. And she just wrote a new book. And she sent it to her publisher. And her publisher pretty much denied it and said, this is garbage. We don't want it. So she's kind of down on her luck. And she's also had a major upheaval in her own romantic life. So that's why she is going to Tranquillum House. And then you have Ben and his wife, Jessica. They're young. They're like 21, 22-ish. And they're there for marriage counseling. They've got an also little quirk to their relationship, which I won't mention. It's not really a spoiler, but it'll take away from the fun of reading it if I tell you. But there's those two. And them and Francis meet like right at the beginning, right as they're trying to drive into the compound of Tranquillum House. And then you have the Marconi family, which is Napoleon, who's the dad, Heather, the mom, and Zoe, the daughter. And their family, and Zoe's 20, so she's an adult daughter. And they're there because they all suffer from guilt and grief, which you learn about that as the story progresses. And then you have Lars, and Lars is a lawyer, and he's like a divorce lawyer, kind of family lawyer. He only represents women who have been wronged by men. So men who cheat on their wives with younger women and want to trade them in and want to divorce them, he supports the wives and will take the husband to the cleaners. He's one of those. He's also gay and in a committed relationship, and he is kind of addicted to health resorts. So that's why he's there. It's just a new fad. Like, it's a new resort, so I'm going to go here. Then we have Tony, who's also middle-aged, and you don't really know why he's there. He doesn't really say. He says he's there to get healthier, but he doesn't really say why he needs to get healthier. And as you read his point of view, you start to learn more of his backstory and all that stuff, and that makes it really interesting. And then the last of the 9 is Carmel. Like, it looks like Carmel, but I pronounced it Carmel all the way through because I'm sure her name's not Carmel. And Carmel is a single mother of 4. She's recently divorced, and her 4 daughters are going with her dad and his new girlfriend on a trip to Paris for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So this is her like getting rejuvenated or having a break from being a single full-time mom. So they all get there, they all meet each other, and it kind of takes off from there. And then you have 3 other additional perspectives from Masha, who is the owner and the person who runs the resort. And then you have Yao, who is one of Masha's like wellness consultants or whatever. And so he helps the guests and all that. So you have him, and you have Delilah, who's also a wellness consultant and a guest. Delilah only has 1 chapter POV. Yao has quite a few, and Masha has a couple here and there. But most of the point of views are centered on the 9, the core 9. And right when I was at towards the end of this book, it was like the last quarter of the book, like I just sat there, like I read a chapter and I looked up and I was like, oh my God, this is literally the Breakfast Club for adults. And that's exactly what it was. It was just like reading the Breakfast Club for adults. Like, you have all these different, there's 9 in this where there was only 5 in the other, or was it 5? Yeah, 5 in the other in the movie, but there was 9 here. But it's like every one of them played a role, like, and had a different personality trait that made it fit like the Breakfast Club, and like the way it ended and came together. And it was literally the Breakfast Club for adults, and it was so amazing. Her writing was amazing. Like, she covered so many hard topics in this, and she did it so well, and it was just an easy 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. If you had any thought of reading this, please go read it. It is so good. Like, the first 100 pages kind of start out a little slow while you're meeting everybody and everybody's getting to the Tranquillum House and getting situated. It's a little bit slower, but once the ball starts rolling, it is insane and intense and fast-paced, and it was amazing. It might make my favorite books of the year because it is just so good. Like, I was so happy I got this for my book of the month this month. But yeah, if you love the Breakfast Club for adults, go read it. Okay guys, that's it. That is my November wrap up. I really wanted to read a little bit more than I actually did. I'm kind of bummed I only read 5 books, but hey, it ended on a great note. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these books. I'd like to know what you guys thought about them, or if you're planning on reading them soon, I'd like to know. And that is it. That is November. Hopefully I'll have a little bit better reading month in December, but December is also Christmas. And, kids being home all the time, so we'll see. But I will see you guys later. Bye.